got a little bit of a cold, so my voice cracks. Hopefully you can understand me. There was some handouts I set at the back. Hopefully they're probably gone by now. But if you sort of pass those around and look over somebody's shoulder, we can probably follow. Dean said, I want to have a conversation with you about local issues. I can say at this juncture, first budget decision hasn't been made in Virginia. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of sessions. A lot of the focus has been around refining numbers, doing projections. Here? Okay, does that help? No? Turn up in here. Is this one working?
Rick, you'll do a test.
This one seems to be. Is that better? Yeah. Here we go. Okay, start over. There was a handout. It was in the back. Probably not enough to go around, but if you sort of look over somebody's shoulder that has them, I expect they're all gone. We can follow along in the presentation. I'm going to try to talk a little bit about where we're at in revenue. Fundamentally, it is a revenue issue going into the session about what will shape the budget. I just said that as of this date, there hadn't been the first decision made on the budget. We go live December 17th. We've got a long way to go. There's been a lot of work done on refining numbers in terms of requests, in terms of making projections. If you really want to know where the money is in Virginia, there's a concurrent session with Dr. Hazel on Medicaid and healthcare, and that's where it's at. So we have been really trying to grind down those numbers because it will shape the playing field that we are working on. In this presentation this morning, I am going to give you some updates that haven't been released. They will not be released until tomorrow morning. We'll have a press release. I'll issue a revenue letter tomorrow morning in trying to just get you the information so you can see where we're headed and try to make sense of the situation in Richmond. I would ask you to try to hold that a little bit under wraps if you can until the proper press releases go out on the revenue. But I wanted you to have it. Didn't want to come down here and talk and then go back to Richmond and release that the next morning and not give you the benefit of seeing it. Let me talk a little bit about revenue, and then we're going to open it up for questions and answers. You heard the speaker talk this morning. This is a short session, the General Assembly. So budget's in place. The biennial budget, we're going to amend the budget, and that's either we're going to deal with things that were unknown when that budget was enacted. We're going to deal with things that need to be revised in the budget for this, that, or the other reason, and we'll probably deal with things that need to be rearranged in the budget, things that didn't go as expected or unintended consequences and change. The power to do that, our ability to do that, rests squarely with revenue and how much of it. And it's probably, you've heard uncertainty this morning. There's no greater time of uncertainty in Virginia. We'll talk a little bit about the federal actions that impact Virginia, state government, primarily on the economic side of the equation and the revenue side of the equation. For local governments, it may, with those flow of funds, that may impact you. And some of the things you think are on your agenda right now may change before we get to the end of the session as new issues pop up from the federal government as it tries to deal with its problems. I really think that we'll introduce the budget on the 17th. That will be a starting point, but we're not going to know what the feds are really going to do. I doubt that they're going to get this thing done in a couple of weeks unless they do punt, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But if they don't, then we've got an introduced bill, pretty much like stimulus 4 years ago, where we were working down into the end of February and March, even the last day of the session. I was over Saturday morning over in appropriations, writing language for the money committees in the General Assembly on the stimulus and how to get it in to the budget based on our contacts with Washington. So it is going to be probably a joint effort between the administration, between especially the money committees, in order to deal with this thing if indeed it goes like I see it going. That is, we don't have a greater deal of certainty until sometime in January or February about where this thing is going. This is revenues from last year. The magic you probably heard that slight surplus, pretty close in the big sources. Big money came from sales tax. You can see if you go to that third column, you see 55 million in sales tax. Second biggest was withholding. And then we missed the estimate on non-withholding. Non-withholding is things that are not wages and salaries, that is capital gains, interest, dividends, rents, estimated payments. We were going great guns on non-withholding right till final payments. Final payments fell at 17%, and as a result of that, we didn't make the forecast on non-withholding. That was offset by refunds. Refunds were running less than we had estimated all year long. So you can see in that third column, you see a plus 147 in refunds, minus 94 on the non-withholding side of it. They sort of offset each other with a little plus. At the bottom, Visa in May, $129 million with 123 from revenue, 6 from the transfer items at year end, and we actually got back to 2008 revenue levels as a state. So it's a long journey to get back just to that level. But as good as that looks, remember it's only 2008. When we look at the spending side in revenue, surplus, cover term, which is the balances in agencies and revenue, about $448 million. It's made up of the 123 and 61, 129 on the revenue side. And then you look at some other balances on the spending side. There's some non-general fund balances, particularly the Virginia Healthcare Fund, which is treated as general fund at year end for financial reporting purposes. So you had some balances there. You had some balances in higher ed. Make it simple, higher ed pulls their money. Tuition money comes in, the state contribution comes in. They pull that in an education general account. They call it a 300 account. And what is left in that account at year end is traditionally been treated as general fund money under the assumption, and there's language in the Appropriation Act, that basically non-general fund for mixed fund endeavors is supposed to be spent first. So the assumption is that what was left is general fund, and that's the way it's been treated by the Commonwealth on the financial balance sheet for years. And then you see some of the mandatory balances that were on the general fund side. That's basically legislative, judicial, some student financial assistance, some debt service programs, like 32 million. And then discretionary balances is all the flock of executive agencies, 152 million that was left unexpended, a lot of which are local programs. Believe it or not, a lot of them have to do with sort of capital endeavors at the local level that don't play out on our fiscal year timetable, so they have to be carried forward for us to honor our commitment to localities in that regard. The 448 was the bottom line on it. And then you can see the uses of that 448 right below it. The first thing that happens is that 66 million in non-general funds is returned to the proper accounts. Because we ran a surplus, we have to make another payment to the Revenue Stabilization Fund, or an additional amount. We had planned to make an amount in the budget for deposit, $78 million. Additional will have to be taken off the top and deposited in FY14. We had some restoration, small balance of the capital projects, and then there was a contingent 3% bonus for state employees that was put into the Appropriation Act if we had revenue surplus or balances permitted, so that comes off the top, $77 million. We had to increase reserves for natural disaster. When natural disaster occurs in Virginia, Virginia fronts the money fully, our share of the declaration. We mark it off on the balance sheet. Total is about $29 million in that reserve right now. It's about $70 million was the marginal increase in it over the course of the year. That'll spend out over a long period of time. And sometimes the budget treatment is more like the way it spends out, but on the balance sheet for year-end purposes, the whole amount is reserved right up front. After that, you see some water quality stuff, about $16 million from the different parts. Water quality is part of the surplus, part of unexpended balances in the agencies. We have to return accelerated sales tax. When we accelerated the sales tax from July into June, we pick up not only state money, on the general fund side, we pick up transportation trust. Doesn't affect the localities because that never enters the state books on the 1% local option, but the transportation does, and we have to pay it back. It was technically in the general fund on June 30th. You see a FAC fund, which is Federal Action Contingency Trust Fund. It's one of the initiatives the governor put forth last August when, or a year from August, when there was the debt ceiling debate in Washington. We got put on a negative outlook by Moody's simply because of our ties to the federal government, the independence of the federal government on our economy. One of the ways that we tried to address that situation was build up liquidity and build up balances that could be used to offset direct impacts of the federal government, and that's what that fund was. The government recommended 50, there's 30 was funded. They're spending another $20 million if the revenue estimates exceed, and 13 it can be deposited in that fund. And then you see a litany of things after that. You see mandatory reappropriations, which is basically, if you go up top and you look at the unspended general fund mandatory balances at 32.4 and the higher ed 66.2. That's just a sum of them, the 98 million, which means that the General Assembly got its money back, and the Commission got its money back, and higher ed got its money back. And this, then a few little pieces that were to be reverted. The big change comes down to the discretionary. You see 41, note up top, discretionary balances in executive department agencies, 152. 30 of that was used for the FAC fund, so that leaves you 122. That 122 was cut down to what could be financed on the balance sheet of 41 million. So right from the get-go, it was a surplus because of the statutory requirements on how the surplus is used, stabilization fund, water quality fund, bonuses for state employees. And then that even if we wanted to, we could not get back all the balances that were in state agencies. Only 41 million was reserved out of that 122. I can tell you we've pretty well gotten to that analysis, and I think that figure will probably be, when we get to budget on the 17th, around 35 million. So we stayed within that 41, probably picked up about 6. And if from that 41, if you look at that 6 million, that's probably the only thing that we get to spend in the new budget. All the rest of this stuff is spoken for. So it was a surplus. Good news. Spoken for. Doesn't do anything really going forward. It does get a few things off the table. It gives us liquidity in terms of the FAC fund, in terms of stabilization funds, sort of guard against the federal actions coming down. It does help water quality. Water quality was about $60 million last year. That helped localities with direct funding. Water quality wastewater projects is another $16.9 million that can be reserved for that purpose and used during the session for that purpose. So, a couple of good things get off the table, but it doesn't, from a general perspective, do anything for us in terms of building the budget. The one thing that it does do is on the revenue side, if you look at the performance, we had estimated in 12 that we needed 4.5% in the budget. We got 5.4 in terms of revenue, which means that going forward in 13 from that new established base, you're going to have to grow about 2.9% to reach the estimate. So that's about half speed from what we grew in 12. And that is important because of the uncertainty that continues to grow and sort of focuses on FY14 in Virginia. So this is what a lot of play about the surplus and uses of the surplus. It went pretty much as according to statute, but this is sort of a plus for budget development in that we don't need as much revenue out of the projections to get to a stable position of the budget that was enacted. Okay, so how have we done? We need 2.9% slow growth. How have we done in the first part of the year? Here's the first quarter of the year. And you can see a very pattern in this. We're actually running behind. We're at now 1.3% versus a 2.9% that we needed for the forecast. And there's some sort of technical reasons why we're in this shape and some more fundamental reasons. On the technical side, I'll recall that June 30th ended on a Saturday. So it means that the last business day of FY12 was the Monday, which is July 2nd. So it is actually, we don't even start this fiscal year until July 3rd from a business standpoint when we started depositing money to FY13. Everything that came in on July 2nd was reported June 12th. So we lost deposit days. And a typical deposit day may be anywhere from $40 to $60 million. So it is not a small thing. So we started out in July behind in the number of days, just the way the calendar fell out. We see the negative 1.8. It particularly affects withholding. We did get a boom from sales tax from the adjustments on undoing the accelerated sales tax, but all in all, it was a negative in July. You rebound in August, because August is sort of fair in terms of the number of days. And so you get a little bit better read at 2.7 versus 2.9. Pretty slow growth, still, particularly in withholding, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Then we get to September, minus 0.7% in September. Brought on again by the calendar, we lost 2 deposit days in September. So through the first quarter of the year, we're 3 deposit days down. Now, going forward, we gained 2 deposit days in October. So by the time we were done with October, we are back to all down 1 day. And that 1 day we won't get back until the end of the year. Remember, June 30th will fall on Sunday rather than Saturdays. So Monday, July 1st will be when we get it back. That will be the deposit day that will come back into the state. So some of this is going to ride with us all year long. We gain most of it back in October. We'll lose a deposit day in November, gain it back in December, and then we've got some teeter-tottering that happens through the course of the spring, but we don't get that 1 day back in October till the last day of the year. So here's where we are, 1.3 versus 2.9. The calendar sort of influencing that. On the more fundamental side is estimated payments. on corporate income. You've heard the corporate lot of cash, and we've been doing very well on corporate income. And going in, corporations make estimated payments in September like individuals, and we got some surprises. We found our overall projection up 3%, down 7%. And here's sort of the sectors that file corporate. So it's not uniform across the scope of all the firms. If you look at the total small taxpayer down the bottom, that green line, 3.5%. This is 13 over 12 for the first quarter. That's about in line with what we had projected, the 3% on corporate. Where you see it is the pink area is information, retail, trade, other, and you see the footnote, 50% of the other is VACo, financial activities, and telecommunications. We've got some situational issues in some of those sectors, and that's not coming back. Just to be frank, this is one estimate we are going to, I should say, the Governor's Advisory Board on revenue estimates meets a week from today to try to come to a consensus forecast on revenues that could be used in the budget. This is one area I feel certainly will come down over the course of the year, given where we're at. So, and you see some negatives in energy too, up at the top, second one from the top. Energy, that's just coal mostly, and it was negative in 12 as in 13, just a little bit more negative in 13. So the turnarounds are information, retail, trade, other. In retail trade, a lot of big retailers don't have what we call a February to January fiscal year, and because they file their estimated payments in October rather than September, so this is not really totally clean on retailers. It could change, and indeed, with what I would give you today, it did change during October. Here is some of the new news that will be released tomorrow on October. We had a very good October, as we needed to do. I mean, remember, we get 2 deposit days back, and that plays particularly into withholding. So we had a 15% month, mainly driven by calendar, but some uplift in some of the other accounts that I'll go through. So we're now ahead of the forecast year to date, 4.8 versus 2.9. Again, when we go into November, we'll lose deposit days, so I would expect this to come back towards that red line a little bit. And this is sort of the mystery. We've got some strength in various sectors of the economy. We've got this great deal of uncertainty at the federal level, especially in the defense sector, hanging over us, and trying to mitigate the risk and pick a forecast that's responsible is going to be a very, very tough thing to do at this stage of the game. Let's look at some of the sources. Withholding came back. If you look at the year-to-date, this is the first third of the year through October versus the annual estimate. We're at 3.1 versus 3.5. Again, the only difference is that 1 day in there. I suspect that on the withholding front, that's going to be a close call about whether it stays there or whether probably the risk is a little bit on the downside for this meeting. Non-withholding, I feel confident probably that could come up a little bit, as well as you see on refunds. We missed refunds the last 2 years. Running, the negative there means that we paid out less than we anticipated. So it's actually a plus to the revenues per situation, that it's a plus to the revenue stream. There'll be adjustments in both of those areas. Sales tax has been the strength. It's where we got most of the money last year in 12 on the surplus. You can see 7.6 versus 2.8. You've got to adjust for the accelerated sales tax. I looked at the red boxes down at the bottom. 3.4 on sales tax year to date versus 1.7. Still a pretty healthy variance on that. The big question there is October, for some strange reason, sales tax was not good. It was 1.1% month. Now, hopefully that was just, people sort of nuzzled in with the uncertainty in the elections, and that's not a longer-term trend, it's just something situational, but it's something that bears looking at in the future, because it's been the source over the last 9 months that has driven us to surplus. On the will, suits, and needs, you see we're running ahead there. That's a housing market, and it's everything you read about housing, it is picking up. We've had, you can't count last month because of the deposit days, but you just got that. It's about the 8th month in a row, double digit in recordation. So there is some hard evidence, at least in the revenue, that housing is making a comeback. Corporate and insurance are problem areas. Estimated payments on corporations were down last year. The adjustments haven't caught up. I'm sure that will come down as we get into this discussion. In corporate, as I said, with the 7% down on estimated payments in September, I feel certain that you can see 1 through versus the 3, that will come down. So that's sort of where we are going into next Monday, and what we're looking at on individual sources. And then we got this thing for 14. A lot of talk about sequestration, whether it can be a deal or not, but it's more than sequestration. If you look at this, everything that's going on, it is sequestration, which is the cuts. The speaker alluded to them this morning, about equally spread between domestic programs and defense. $1 trillion has got to get out of the budget. But you've got the tax rate cuts, Bush tax rate cuts, go ahead December 31st. The payroll tax, and I think that's more important than probably any of them, gets a lot less, probably is one that is farther away in terms of any sort of agreement in Washington or whether to extend or not. But this is going to happen. I mean, on the tax cuts, Treasury can put out schedules for withholding, they can delay those schedules somewhat. So it doesn't mean that they have to happen immediately in terms of the withholding at the federal level, even if the tax rate is going up. On the payroll tax, that will happen pretty quickly. That's going to come out of employees, and employees are going to have to pay it to the Social Security Administration. You have the alternative minimum tax, the fix on that runs out December 31st. On the Medicare side, 30% reductions to doctor's payments, that will run out. Just another cloud in this mixture up there. And then you've heard the federal debt ceiling. We're going to approach that. So even if you pass sequestration, nothing's done about that. We're going to have to deal with the federal debt ceiling, or at least Congress is going to have to deal with that. And that's sort of the fight that started all this stuff. So there's a number of things here that need to be taken care of. I put on top of that, there's a TANF reauthorization for a calcium farm bill. So, Washington has pretty well been, at a stalemate for, a good part of last year. They're going to have to get in here, make it up in a pretty quick time. And that's why I say, I don't think this is solved by the time we introduce the budget. So I think we have a starting point on the 17th. I think we have a living, breathing document as it goes through the General Assembly for both the money committees, the House, Senate, the executive, as we try to grapple with what comes down from Washington. The big risk to Virginia is that last wall. We're heavy defense, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But if we go to sequestration, we change the scope of the national forecast. Right now, if you look at 2 major national forecasting companies, be that Global Insight or Moody's, economy.com, they got, for the shorter run, 6 months or so, a real GDP at 2%, Global Insight a little bit less than that, and then they sort of break later, about midway through 13, depending on your assumptions about what the fix is for this and whether that is a a stimulus to the economy, whether it's a drag on the economy. Global Insight is much more cautious on that than Moody's. Moody's sees some bounce back if a fix is made. But if no fix, the scoring by everybody is that we will go into recession again. CBS, but at those numbers, both Global Insight and Moody's would say the same thing. And then we're fighting something totally different because our forecast today does not have a recession built into it. It is slow growth, but it's not recessionary. So this would change the playing field and be yet another thing to deal with, not only with just the impacts of sequestration. This is why sequestration is important to us, and it's a dichotomy in Virginia that I mentioned at the very beginning. If you look at grants and direct payments to the state of Virginia, this is ranked high to low. In grants, we're 49th in the nation on a per capita basis. Only Nevada is less than us. So we're down at the bottom. So if sequestration went to the grant side, it affects Virginia less. On the other hand, you look at wages and salaries, procurement, not surprisingly, with the federal establishment, we have Northern Virginia and Diamond, and the procurement apparatus, we have Northern Virginia, number one per capita employment. So if it goes to that side, then we are heavily impacted in terms of the economy, and that's state government. Now, local government, some of these grants that would be, I think, on the flow-through money would be a hardship on local governments, and quite frankly, would enter your thinking then in terms of what is it that you're requesting from the state to do about your current situation. So just keep that in mind that you may, some of the playing field is perhaps changing as things in Washington change and where those cuts come out. In your package, you can see this is, you want to see where all the states rank. You can see Virginia, but you put it all together, you're told we're at number 2, when you weigh them. So you got a lot of exposure on the economy. Okay, what is the impact on the economy? And I don't think this impact gets to us in 13. Again, we had some momentum going in to the new year. There'll probably be a time lapse before the feds get their game in gear, and it comes down to the federal agencies, down to the state government. We've seen that in the past. I think we've muddled through on 13. Maybe even, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have a little left on 13, but 14 is a big crapshoot. And it's all because of this, because if you look at recent studies that have come out about what are the effects of sequestration on Virginia. Steve Fuller and Chris Shamir have done analysis for aerospace industry. I think they put it at 207,000 jobs. Pew Center, 122. I think there was one for the U.S. Manufacturers Association. This is in Virginia. I think the same. See Martin Riley, the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, contracted for a study from Fuller and Shamir to try to place where are these jobs at and what types of jobs are there that are subject to this. I think that was about 164, something like that, Martin. So these numbers, 100 to 200,000 are in the range you see from these various analyses on the impact of Virginia. Now, it's a stacked analysis, and stacked, what I mean is that's all other things equal, no other moving parts on it. And there's always moving parts, that's the issue. So if you look back of when we faced this sort of a similar issue in the early 90s, we were on negative watch at Moody's at the time. It was the end of the first Gulf War. Big transition from defense, and that was the issue in Virginia at the time. That employment transitioned into technology in North Virginia. And we were all for a few years, but towards the end of the 90s, we ran, you know, 3 double-digit years in revenue growth. That's overall in the general fund. So it had a very positive effect in terms of the transitions that occur. None of that is built into the static analysis. It's just losses without knowing. These are, and many of the procurement, very talented, very highly paid people, very mobile people. The real question to me is whether they, if it all goes, whether they stay in Virginia or they practice elsewhere. Would be the question. I think that they're probably employable and will stay employed to some extent. It doesn't include any consolidations like we saw in VAC. We had VAC in 2005, shortly Virginia at risk. That's what, you know, all conventional wisdom was going into VAC, and we ended up actually with more military than we started with. Big expansions at Belvoir, Fort Lee doubled in size. So consolidations can make a big difference in the way the feds take this guy. We've heard nothing from basically the federal agencies. If you know they were faced with this guy, how would they plan for it? So you know we sort of ride this thing just like you all do. The large defense contractors and talking to them. And a lot of them, you understand, they're very well capitalized. They do, you know, really technical stuff, drone kind of things, and they believe that they're going to survive this. They've changed their investment strategies somewhat, but they've got the capitalization. They may be a different type of business, but they will be in business. They're very much worried about the small guys in the supply chain. Some of those folks make like packaging for just parts and military and stuff, and they don't have the capital. These are the guys that don't really have marketing staffs. Okay? They never had that. I mean, their market is procurement. That's what they're tied to. So that's their business model. If that goes down, then the whole business model changes, and they're very subject to negative impact. And we wouldn't expect it to be all of a sudden. I said when we went through 13, you look at shipbuilding, got contracts in place for that 16, so it becomes a little bit more protracted than just immediate. But you know, with this backdrop here, and you know, no news on the Washington front as to how this is going to play out. You know, think about it. The advisor will meet with the governor next Monday. Tell him about revenue. What are they going to say? My buck is they're going to say, be conservative, you know, be cautious, build up liquidity. If you spend money, spend it where you can get it back. Those are the kinds of suggestions I think that he will hear from that board, and we'll probably play out the budget development. Let me just talk a little bit about local aid, and we're going to open it up to a little more. Some of your questions. If you look at sequestration, and some of the estimates are out on that, particularly in Head Start programs, special education programs, Title I, some pretty big impacts there that flow through to locality. So that's why I would say that by the time you get done with the federal government or whatever the mix is, and the cuts are not going to go away. It's just going to be, you know, to what degree they're taken, they're going to have to be part of finding the deal. Maybe some change in timing when it happens, but those things are going to be on your pad at some point. And you're going to have to decide what are you asking the state to do or asking others to do about them in lieu of what's on your pad right now. Now, the number one priority I've heard, I think I've heard from every city, county, most of the towns, is the ATL, the locality reversion clearing account. And I can assure you that when I look around the table at the players in with the governor talking budget, there's not one of us that likes that account. So you don't have to argue with me on policy on that. We get it. It is a matter of having resources to fix it. Big ticket items on the table will be Medicaid and healthcare reform and what actions we take. We're going to have to cost bear those regardless. We can't. We can't opt out of cost. There's going to be cost there. So our big concern is to try to get those costs as accurate as we can, try to clearly see our options and what chances we have to mitigate some of that in order to have resources to do other things. So I think ATL is probably somewhat dependent on the success of that, and going down on some of those costs, and especially in HHR. And again, I said everybody probably should have been over to listen to Dr. Hazel. I should have been over there probably, because that discussion and where it goes is going to have a big, big impact on our ability to deal with these other kinds of issues. The other thing is what happens in revenue in 14. We brought it down 60 to 45 on the ATL. Players would like to bring it down, at least bring it down. Again, whether it's resources, we take a hit on 14, and we're patching other holes in the budget. It puts additional pressure on our ability to do that. But you don't have to argue that one on policy. It is really sort of the fiscal means to do it. On water quality, we got somewhat of a break with the surplus, a little bit more going in. I think there is not a consensus yet, but at least some talk about trying to take a little bit more of that off the platter. We're good about $80 million in direct funding. There was a bill in the Senate, passed the Senate, that would provide some additional relief of about $300 million, I think it was a total, it was non-issue. And this revenue plays into our debt capacity too. So, there's all this revenue gets linked up to our ability to do these things. But that got through the Senate last time, being to the House actually direct fund water quality. You got 16.9, there's some needs out there in the agricultural non-point side of the equation. I think if we were to look at the approved agreements to date, there are about 16. There's about a little over 100 million more to do over and above what we've done to date. And that's going to go up as these agreements get finalized with DEQ. So that issue is alive and well and under discussions. I hate to bring it up, but Line of Duty Act, we've had some meetings on that. There's been a task force that has been created that Jim Campbell participates in that, as well as the first responders, Martin Kent, Chief of Staff, myself, and Marlon Decker from the administration. Trying to look at things practical things we could do to control cost in that program. And everything you do is very difficult. It's very, very splendid. It's really hand-to-hand combat trying to win anything on that front. But it seems to me, coming out of at least the discussions we've had to date, we can do a better job of coordination of benefits from the various aspects of it, especially when you have widows and what is that entitlement if they get remarried. Their situations change. Do we coordinate benefits at all, based on future changes, or do we stay, what the sort of the promise is at day one? So a lot of that sort of under discussion, that's going to move at glacial speed. I suspect it's going to be with us for a couple of years, I think, before you see any real progress on that. But there will be a report filed, and I don't know if people, general assembly members could surprise me on that, but between election year and just the difficulty and complexity of those issues, I think this is pretty much an uphill battle. There has been proposals on to increase E911 pay for it. There's some of that floating around at this stage of the game. I don't see the government would support that, those proposals, unless there's some other ingredients brought in. And when I say other ingredients, you hear from time to time the backhauls, tax reform. You got members that's serious about tax reform, members not just serious about tax reform, so let's put that on both sides of that issue. And what that might entail, and your guess is as good as mine on that. The governor's got huge notebooks on that topic about what's the alternatives, things people could do that he might see, but there's literally no consensus, no traction on that. And I say the same thing for transportation. Transportation, everybody is interested in doing transportation. I personally have been burnt on transportation. I'd like to see that situation put to rest. But there's difference of opinions of how you get there. There's probably 10 different plans out there, privately circulating. So, and there's no consensus around those. So, as we've seen pretty much in the past, you'll see proposals. The real trick is can consensus form around some combination of those proposals, get some traction, get something more. Big wild card. I don't know. Still big issues, Tidewater number 2. Just like the toll is probably make it a little bit more towards the front of the line, but I just don't know if it comes from there to do that right. Let me just open it up to questions. What haven't I covered? And Enoch,
all right. Secretary, thank you for being here today. I was just looking at your chart on slide 6, and huge growth in the information sector from a corporate tax collection. I'm assuming some of that is from the results of the election, and I'm wondering if kind of that wind down from the election is built into your numbers. I'm sure it is, but just wondering how the state's.
Well, remember this is first quarter, so this is prior elections through September. So you don't have that. Actually on the information side, you can see the big change. A lot of that is going to be the technology in Northern Virginia. I mean, it's just everything is stagnant. I mean, the federal agencies face mandated cuts. They don't know how they're going to make it. A lot of these technology contracts span for years, so you've got at least some maintenance, probably some provisions for cutback, but not total ending, and eventually it probably won't be renewed. So you get companies that are looking very soft now, looking to change their business models, or looking for other opportunities. So I expect some of this is just due to uncertainty that I alluded to. I know a lot of defense contractors have built up balances. They're not investing. They're not hiring because strategically they've got different paths ahead, and they don't know enough about what lies in the future for the federal government to make that call yet. So they're waiting. They're poised to do something, but what is the issue? And I didn't see some of that in here. But there's no doubt if you go into sequestration, this, the Northern Virginia Tidewater influence are going to be big time in terms of the migration from professional business services, which is really high-paid jobs for withholding purposes, probably maybe some job growth in other areas, but it could offset. So it has revenue impact, even if it doesn't, in terms of neutral in terms of employment impact. No substitution.
Thank you. A twofold fiscal problem in the local regional jails that we deal with in our communities. We have the Department of Corrections leaving inmates in our jails past the 61-day required time period in which the state is supposed to pick them up. and then the Department of Corrections decides exactly what they're going to pay us to do that, which is $12 a day, which is far less than our cost to operate. So we feel we are subsidizing the state because the state is not picking up your inmates. How do you plan to address that?
Well, remember, when you look at the per diem, that's the operating cost, not the staffing cost. We pay the staffing cost through the Concord on top of that. In many cases, we've paid up to 50% for the capital construction of those facilities. So the state's contribution in terms of local jails is pretty much. You can go to other states, and I don't think you can get that deal in other states. I mean, it's when you add it all up. Now, the issue is we have that 5,000 state prisoners backed up statewide. And for every locality that doesn't more than this locality does, I can tell you. So if you move them around, we used to think that we got the 2,000 when we were in suits. It's not happening. It's been a source of money for localities. As a matter of fact, from a policy standpoint, what is brewing at the state level is we've got a brand new prison, mothball. Brand new, we have nothing. Yet, we're paying for expansion at the local level, paying per diem at the local level. That is a policy issue that's going to play out at some point. It's not going to just, stay dormant. I think the fiscal pressures have left it dormant, but it's something that's going to jump right to the forefront at some point as the finances release. So, I'm more probably sympathetic to that the per diem amounts don't adjust fast enough. You get that look back on that you're basically reimbursed on what actual counts from a year ago. It's not current time enough. I think there could be some improvement in that, and sympathetic to that argument. But when I look around through the scope and there's excess capacity out in local jails, believe it or not. So that movement around, again, it's what one locality doesn't want, another locality wants. It's hard to get just a statewide perspective on that. It varies locality to locality. Don't know that I answered that very well, Marcus.
Sure.
Sure.
Hi, Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for this overview today. I wanted to talk to you about the teachers' pension program and the share and the state and local participation and responsibilities in that. And with the new GASB 68 rules, it's bringing something to us nationally that is impacting some legacy structure we have. Now, the state tells the local government how many teachers we need to have for SOQ. The state defines the benefit. State defines the rate. And even if a local government wants to put in to keep down its share of the unfunded liability, it doesn't get any credit for it. If it pays in, it just goes into the pot, just goes into the pool. The one thing that, and the state also defines or directs that the entire bill for payment for the liability is in the name of the local government. However, it also tells the local government to the dollar what its state share is going to be on a reimbursement basis. But by virtue of the bill, all the state-defined program, but the bill coming in the name of the local government, that's the key factor. Now, the entire $15 billion unfunded liability is going to be shifted to the local books because of the billing structure. So one thing we want to ask is the truth in billing. Since it is very specific to the dollar in the state budget, how much the state's going to give each local government, then why can't the VRS billing be truth in billing, the state share, the local share, and every tub stand on its own bottom?
Yeah, this is another tough issue for localities. It has to be standards, the way they're written. basically, these are local employees, and you do pay the retirement bill, state gives you a contribution, and it wasn't so many years ago that that contribution was actually even higher than it is today. So it is, from the state's perspective, it's in the funding of the retirement contributions, but they're local employees. And so the liability, I think, from the GASB model, defaults to the locality. Now, I know that probably, as I talked to Bob Schultz this morning, that questions been raised, could that situation be changed, and is there a possibility that it could be split some other how, based on funding? If the state made, for instance, a direct payment to the retirement system, as opposed to
Exactly.
paying localities. And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. On Friday, I had a conversation about this very topic, and I would like to sort of believe that wasn't possible. But Bob seems to think that it may be possible. So I think, we get some analysis and obviously some legal opinions to figure out what is possible on that front. No doubt it's a big pill for localities to swallow. I'm sympathetic to it. The practical side of it is remember that when it comes to recognizing those liabilities, if the state were to recognize a commensurate share with its funding of those liabilities on its books, we're in bad shape, or at least not good shape in terms of the bond markets right now either. I mean, we're issuing at record low rates, but we're still on negative watch. And when the governor went to New York in the very first January of 2012, we got the Moody's, and we were asking what could we do about that situation. And there was just a lot of pushback that you're tied to the federal government. I mean, there's really nothing, you guys, it's not your management, it's not anything. You're going by the way of the federal government. That's the message we heard loud and clear. Bond rating first came out in September, they softened their stance on that a little bit. Said, well, you're not directly tied, it could be separate analysis. So it's sort of a methodological change, but I don't know from a practical standpoint. So if the state is fighting on the sequestration front and a potential downgrade at least by Moody's, if things, the federal government, doesn't get control of things or they don't go the way we'd like to see them go, is the state from a practical situation willing to take this on in this session? And I think it has to be done this session because of your all's hand. So I think even when you get done with all the legal ramifications and analysis, even if it's possible, that there's a big practical question about whether that can happen. And then you've always got, Brown, be careful what you ask for, because if the state assumes liabilities for teachers, what else does it assume? Sort of cuts both ways. I mean, it just, I've been here long enough, I know it, that you set that little snowball going down the hill, it builds, and at the end of the day, you get something that you don't want.
Give an example.
But just a couple of points. And the practicality of it here. From the locals' perspective, the state has assumed control. So if it doesn't want to share in liabilities, then...
This is funding, not control. We don't hire, we don't fire teachers.
However, the definition of the number of teachers, the definition of the benefit, the composition of the benefit, the definition of the rate. Those are the things that are driving the liability. And the locals have no discretion on that. We can't even pay in to try to, on our share, to help.
You can't pay into retirement, but you can, if If the big issue for local governments were the liabilities, you could reserve for that when we were going books, and just like we're at
What
the
about-
PAC fund, for votes. I mean, so there are ways to try to get it.
Yeah.
But
And also another practical
I
point.
said that's
Yeah,
his argument. I think there's got to be some analysis done on that. Number one, when I was told Friday that I think that Bob thinks a little bit differently today, and probably after his conversation with you. So that needs to be explored, whether it's even possible or not, number one.
But we want to stay in dialogue. We want to stay in dialogue.
Oh, we will.
Okay.
We will. But I'm just saying, even if it is possible, understanding the practical problems. That's another, let me just say this before we get to that. One of the things localities are going to have to do in this situation, is sort of inside. You've got to be focused. I mean, I started this conversation, but I hear loud and clear, get rid of ATL. Well, it can't be ATL and this and this and this. When you splinter your message, you cause problems. The money communities don't know what direction. 2 years ago, we got down to conference, ATL was on the block. People were moving to fund it, to get rid of a large portion of it. It got lost, simply because localities got the money, but got it in another fashion. It's just a mixed message.
Yeah, and we can have this conversation offline, and I appreciate the fact that you've taken your time to come address us, but, you, the state, have set the rates for teachers, okay? We had a system that was funded at 102%. In 2002, it's now 61%. Forget the liability. 2 years from now, this county, every other locality in the state is going to have to pay 5 to 6% of payroll for teachers. We don't have the ability for controlling what the rate is. Had we had it, I doubt we'd be at the 61% range. The ATL issue, I think, is a side issue. It's a small issue. Last year, last day of session, I was down at the General Assembly when the General Assembly decided our local employees had to pay 5%. You recall that day. All that did was add cost to this local government. We've never had the ability of saying we want to pay less for our general government employees for retirement. We've never had that ability. We've always paid what VRS has paid. So we got grouped into this situation, and now with GASB, I think you can't have it where we're worried about our balance sheet and localities are not worried about theirs. What's happening with teacher retirement is going to wipe away 40% of Henrico County's balance sheet in one fell swoop. So,
Yeah, I have seen that to a lot of those issues. And we're funding, 55% on retirement. So it's not an issue of funding and recognizing we don't make hiring and firing decisions. It's how that plays out. I'm just telling you some of the practical effects of that. One of the things that, just elevate that a little bit, because one of the things I think, and just as a practitioner in this for 42 years, that we're missing at states, localities, federal government, is we're at this point in time where we're all having difficulties. Normally, in recessions you find, one level of government does it bad, maybe another level of government is bad. You've seen that in the past, and certainly early 90s, it was true of the state, financial services kind of white-collar recession. In fact, it didn't affect property values, it affected employment disproportionately state. This situation, we're all in it together. Everybody's having a difficult time. And we haven't taken the opportunity as a national agenda to say, what's the proper synergy between the federal government, between state governments, between local governments. We're grappling with these issues about who ought to assume liabilities for VR. It's a much bigger question. It's a much bigger question. Okay, what is the proper role for, and responsibility for local governments, for state governments, for the federal government? But we're not addressing it. Unfortunately, you know, it does roll downhill, you know.
We're at the
And
bottom
you
of the
get
hill.
flat.
And we're at the bottom of the hill.
Do we have another question?
All right, we're talking about the and all the other things, the load, everything else has been loaded upon. The simple question I have to ask is, at what point in time does the state, does the federal government also need to realize that retirement system is a motive? So whereas all of us in the private sector, like 401ks, retirement for government employees is growing. And the cost to us is growing. At what point in time does the state understand that we can't afford it? And
But the deputy retirement system in January of 14. It'd be a hybrid plan, there'd be components of the defined benefit plan. Some of the issues that have come up on that is the split rate between the employer and the employee. Right now, employees actually go into the way that plan was designed will pay a lot of that share. And then on top of that is more of the 401k kind of. So when we get to January 14, basically, the old retirement system's done. I mean, it's, every new employee in that will be a good portion of the retirement will come from the 401k style of retirement system with defined contribution rate. Now, you heard the speaker this morning that didn't think that went far enough, you know, that maybe it might be more defined contribution, maybe defined benefit. But that's what the General Assembly worked out in its wisdom, and that was the last bit of deal on the last day of session last year. So it's moving in that direction. And I think, you know, the aging of the workforce, you're going to see that turn over a lot more rapidly than you would otherwise.
okay, that is the biggest thing looming.
So, yeah, the pension reform has happened in Virginia. Virginia got pretty good marks on what it did. But I mean, even Moody's put a flyer that said that was credit positive for what Virginia did, even though we're on negative plot. So they saw that as a very, very positive move. It's going to happen.
Rick, I'd like to thank you for being here. Good job, good session. Can we all thank Rick?